it is super important to get this information out as much as possible, and for you to spread the word, especially since we're recording this. If you know someone that desperately needs to know information about vape, some of the basic introduction things, please let them know about this presentation so that they can watch it when they get an opportunity. This is something that, over the last few years, it really hit us pretty hard in our area. At one point, Colorado was #1 in the nation for underage vaping, and the top counties in the state were Pitt and Eagle and Garfield, and so that pushed us to the top of the nation for underage vaping, and so it really just kind of exploded on us. And so there's a lot of new and updated information that if you've seen my presentation before, don't step away or anything. I've updated a lot of new information. We have some new laws and some new statistical information. So hang in there with us. If you're new, welcome. And if you've never seen a vape, never heard anything talked about vape, brace yourself. Hopefully it won't be too shocking. But for those of you that are meeting me for the first time, I'm Thomas Wright. I work for Basalt Police Department. I've been the school resource officer for the last 4 years for Basalt schools. And I've been a resource officer in my career for 11 years. And I've been in public safety now as an officer since 2001. Vaping has really become a little bit at the heart of some of the things that I do, especially in works with school, in that as we kind of get towards the end of the presentation, I'll share personally how it's impacted my family and really kind of pushed me in a position to where I really needed to understand more and educate myself more about vape and really what it's doing to our kids. And so just kind of hang in there with us. If you have questions along the way, raise your hand, and Jen or Allison will let me know, and we'll try to get those answers as we go. So, all right, Jen, let's move forward. So what is vape? If you're new to it, what's the big deal? And so vaping is actually the act of inhaling and exhaling an aerosol. A lot of people really refer to it as kind of a vapor. It's produced by an e-cigarette or a similar type of device. We're seeing more similar devices, more so than the e-cigarette really. But the term is used because e-cigarettes, they don't produce the tobacco smoke that maybe in growing up that you were used to seeing. But instead it produces kind of an aerosol. And so this is often, the big mistake is, especially with people who are like, hey, what's the big deal? It's just water vapor. Well, it's actually not water vapor. It's actually consists of really fine particles. And many of these particles, they contain various amounts of toxic chemicals. Those chemicals have been linked with cancer as well as respiratory and heart disease, not to mention we've discovered that the coils that are in these devices, they off-gas whatever that coil is made up as far as that metal, whether it's a copper, a brass, or whatever, it off-gases that metal. So not only are you inhaling or bringing those toxic chemicals into your body, but also the coils that superheat this to make this aerosol, that metal you're also bringing into your body as well. All right, Jen. So the biggest thing right away is people ask, hey, is this safe? So initially when I first started making these presentations, there was a lot of question, especially in the medical field, about, hey, this is a device that people are using to help them stop smoking. And so whenever we look at, is it safe, we really have to break it down into, well, the best way that I describe it, especially whenever I'm talking to kids in health class, is it safer to get hit by a semi truck, or is it safer to get hit by a train? They're both going to kill you. It's just maybe the train is loaded with a lot more. And so in this case, the train would be the typical tobacco cigarettes that we know about, which have hundreds of different known chemicals, versus the e-cigarettes or the vaping devices, which we're learning are still linked to all cardiovascular, lung diseases, heart diseases that are still killing our kids and the people that are using these devices. It's just, so I guess we could say it's safer than getting hit by the train, or safer than smoking. So e-cigarettes produce a number of dangerous chemicals. If you can kind of see here, some of the words that are not necessarily the best at pronouncing, but acetaldehyde, acrolein, formaldehyde, all these aldehydes cause lung disease, as well as cardiovascular or heart disease. And so these e-cigarettes that contain the acrolein, that's a herbicide that we use to kill weeds, just to kind of pull one of them out there to give you an idea of what we're pulling into our body. So the e-liquid that's, especially in some of these vaporizer or vapes that you can kind of fill, they also contain propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin-based liquids that kind of carry that nicotine. They hold that nicotine. And then there's flavoring and other chemicals and metals, but not the tobacco that we're familiar with that we see in cigarettes. So also these devices, you can vape THC or cannabis, marijuana. THC is the chemical that is responsible for the mind-altering effects in marijuana. And then there's even synthetic drugs that I'm seeing more and more kind of Midwest or out on the East Coast that they're using instead of nicotine or the marijuana, because marijuana hasn't been legalized in their state. So, of course, all these studies recently, especially that have been going on, are showing that that aerosol vapor from the vape products all contain dangerous toxins, heavy metals, all the chemicals that are known to cause cancer and other diseases. And more and more, we're seeing more doctors refusing to endorse vaping as a healthy alternative to smoking. So, you know, initially, whenever it's like any new product that kind of hits the market, there's been no studies that have been done on it. Vaping wasn't first made to be monitored by Food and Drug. And so we were seeing this product just show up, and we had no clue what it could do to our bodies. But doctors were kind of initially taking a look at vape as, hey, this is an alternative to maybe smoking, because we knew that tobacco smoking was killing people and causing cancer. And there was so little information initially whenever vape hit the market. We really didn't know the effects. But now, since we've had so many years of vape being on the market and really seeing the impact not only in adults, but more so in what's happening with our kids, this is why doctors are, hey, this is not a healthy alternative to smoking. All right, Jen. And we'll skip this unless you can get the video to load. There is a video with this one. We had a little bit of issue. I don't know if we've been able to get that.
I think this should work. Okay.
I'm Daniel Korch. I'm a Denver Health Family Medicine doctor, and I spend a lot of my time working on smoking initiatives. So vaping is when you take a liquid, and that liquid is vaporized into a substance that you inhale into your lungs. That inhalation is made up of generally four main substances. It's the flavoring. There's nicotine, glycerin, and polyethylene glycol. So what's interesting about the vaping liquid is that the flavors mask what's actually happening in your body. And what's happening in your body, if there's nicotines there, is you're developing a tolerance and addiction to it. So we know that people who vape are more likely to start smoking. We also know that people who start vaping and use nicotine have a harder time stopping, because that nicotine is addictive. So young adults need to know that they are being specifically targeted by the manufacturers of the vaping devices and the vaping liquid, because they're susceptible to the addiction that's being caused by the nicotine and the other substances in the vaping liquids. It's not easy to know how that's going to affect them long term, but we know it's addictive, and we know it's expensive, and we know the manufacturers are making a whole lot of money selling it. What bothers me most about the manufacturers of the vaping devices is that they portray healthy lifestyles and a fresh alternative to smoking.
Developing a product is addictive and habit-forming in the long run.
As a doctor, I cannot endorse vaping for teens or adolescents.
We know it's bad.
Okay, I put that in the chat also because of the way that I was sharing and you couldn't see the whole thing. So
yeah, perfect. So if you get an opportunity, so Tobacco Free Colorado has a lot of different videos. If you want to check them out, several different doctors have taken time to help Tobacco Free Colorado in this initiative over the last couple of years. So if you want to hear what some of the pediatricians and some of the other doctors really have to say, take some time to go in and check that out. You won't see anything different than what we're seeing in this presentation, as far as they're not going to endorse vaping in any way, but they'll give you some more medical background of why their opinions are the way that they are and some of the facts that they have. So whenever we look at vape, so how does vape work? So kind of just to simplify it, you have a mouthpiece, you have a battery, or some way that it powers the device, and then you have the cartridge or a tank that contains the e-liquid or the e-juice or the nicotine juice. And so whenever the battery heats the cartridge or the way that it's going to deliver the vaping, many different vaping products activate differently, but essentially they're activated whenever the person puts the mouthpiece up to their mouth and they inhale. Very much like whenever you see someone light a cigarette and they inhale. It's vaping is very similar, and there's no lighting of the device. It's all internal. And so that superheating component turns the contents of the e-liquid into an aerosol, and then it's inhaled and exhaled out of the lungs. So I do get a lot of people who, whenever we talk about this, ask me about secondhand smoke, because, you know, whenever we're seeing cigarette smoke, that seems to linger more in the air. And so we are seeing still the effects of secondhand smoke coming from vaping. Especially if you're vaping inside of a car, the particles still stay in the air. If you're in a close proximity to someone, there's still that secondhand smoke on exhalation. It's still happening. So ultimately, these devices consist of power unit, tank. They can be recharged. Some of them are preloaded, and once you use them for what's in there, they get disposed and you buy a new device. So depending on how often they're using them, the volume or the tidal volume, in other words, how big of a breath that they're taking whenever they're puffing on the vapes, depends on how many puffs are in the device. It could be anywhere from 200 puffs to someone who's taking deep breaths to up to 600 puffs, depending on if someone's just lightly hitting the device. So typically, kind of to break it down into, especially whenever you're looking at Juuls, they have this cartridge. They say one cartridge, depending on the flavorings and the different types of cartridge. But at a minimum, the cartridge is equal to a pack of cigarettes. So that kind of gives you an idea. So if you've got someone who is going through an entire cartridge in one sitting, they just smoked a pack of cigarettes. It's kind of the equivalent to that. All right, Jen. So this kind of shows a couple of different vaping devices. You can see that it can get pretty technical in how they break it down, but ultimately you have a mouthpiece, the charging unit or the battery, and then where the liquid is stored. And so just gives you a general idea. Okay, Jen. And we'll skip this slide. So types of vape. So we have the market really exploded, especially since it went unregulated for so long. You had essential oil companies who wanted to jump on board. But typically, what a lot of people didn't know was all these vaping products, if you go back to see who really is sponsoring them, it's all your big tobacco companies. And so we've had such a huge push to stop America from smoking. We have these tobacco companies that still need to make money. And so this was their new gimmick. They were able to produce all of these devices. Some of them were more expensive, especially whenever they got into the oils and different things than buying packs of cigarettes. So they were still able to make money. But you have flavored oils and juices, CBDs, the nicotine, raw marijuana vapes. You have marijuana juice. You have marijuana wax conversion kits. There's a little bit of everything that's available on the market, especially if you get on YouTube and start kind of Googling the types of devices and different things like that. You're going to see a wide variety. And of course, what we've seen in the criminal justice world is an uptick in people using the vaping devices to put whatever type of illegal drug that they want into those and use the vaping device to bring that into their body. Because a lot of states are using, they don't have laws against vaping devices if you're older than 21. And so knowing what's inside that vaping device has now really become a huge problem. Okay, go ahead. So a lot of you are here because, hey, what is the current teen culture and trends? And so, you know, when we were at the couple of years ago at the high school level, we just really saw a huge explosion of this. And then a lot of things started happening with Tobacco 21, Aspen and Basalt, and the counties started making some laws and some ordinances against this. And so we started to see what we thought was a decrease initially, but I really don't think that we're seeing our kids use it less. I think they're just being a little bit more secretive about where they're using it. They know if I'm at high school, I'm not going to do it in the bathroom. I'm not going to do it publicly. So they're being very selective about where they're vaping now. So some of the vaping terms that you're going to see or might hear is just pretty generic. Vaping, juuling. Some of these other terms I've really not have heard in our area, but vooping, cloud chasing, skitzing, ride in the mist. More so, there's been such a social media push for vaping, and that's where a lot of the advertising and a lot of the things that we're seeing to promotion to teens all through social media. So there's a lot of different terms that they use through social media whenever it comes to that. But some of the vaping trends that we're seeing is we're seeing drip kits and conversion kits. And so really what this is someone can take what looks like a normal tobacco or / nicotine vape, and they can use a specialized kit to introduce whatever type of liquid they want into that vaping device, whether it's marijuana, whether whatever type of drug or whatever substance that they want to put into that vaping device. They're able to use these kits to upload those cartridges themselves. And so when you might think that someone is just vaping nicotine, really maybe hitting marijuana or doing something else. And so as part of the social media kind of blast, they started doing cloud chasing, hosting these huge events where people would come in and try to do making kind of like whenever they would exhale into an art form, just kind of like, you know, when maybe some of you were kids, you could see adults, when they were smoking cigarettes, they would blow rings and different things. It's really exploded into kind of an art form. I haven't seen that so much up here, more on the Front Range. I'm seeing those kinds of gatherings. But, you know, we have seen over 9 million users in the US. So think about, of those users, just under 4 million, you got 3.6 million that are under 18 years old that are vaping. Okay. So we're seeing nicotine and marijuana, or the THC conversion kits. And of course, along the lines with each vape has now kind of become its own product, where you can get specialized gear, you can get specialized skins, you can make your vape, you can design it however you want, you can put whatever pictures on it you want to kind of more personalize it, or for them to make more money. And of course, over the last couple of years, we've seen FDA start to really regulate now. We have the Surgeon General who's put out warnings against vaping, and the CDC's really stepped up its enforcement, and we have a lot of new laws that we'll discuss here shortly. Go ahead. So we've really seen vaping progression over the last few years to where these mods and devices kind of in the upper left here were pretty expensive. You could control the temperature, the rate, everything, all the way down to, in the far upper right corner, that's really the most current things. The kids are calling them puffer bars. And so it's really not designed to be a reloadable device, but this is something that you can get. It's easily concealable. Once you're done with the product, you can just throw it away. So that's kind of what we're seeing currently most frequently. And then on the bottom middle especially, you've got that more designed Juul. But we're seeing Juul is typically, Juul and the puffer bars is what I see most often in our area. Okay. So vape juice, and we'll just briefly talk about this because this has really changed over the last few years, but vape juice or e-juice or e-liquid. So depending on what type of model or what type of vape that you have, you can buy your own juice or loadable juice, or what I'm seeing more and more with our young people is they're getting the vegetable glycerin and then they're loading their own type of juice or making their own type of juice combined with nicotine or marijuana or different things that they're loading into their vape. But typically we see it's a vegetable glycerin, propylene glycol, which that's in coolant, for those of you that doesn't sound familiar. But flavorings like diacetyl, that's kind of the butter flavor, or what the smooth, you know, if you were just to take a vape without any of the flavoring or without any of the buttery flavors or the smoothing agents, I mean, it's like smoking. It burns the throats, it burns the lungs. And so really, to make this more user-friendly or more desirable, especially by our younger people, that's where we're seeing the flavorings and the smoothing contents. But then, of course, they have the nicotine and water that's included in there. Now, fortunately for us, Tobacco 21, whenever the president signed that into law, we really saw a lot of the flavorings go away, but some of the things that you can still get out there that are still available, depending on what sources, you've got some of them listed here: banana cream, beach bum, berry blast, perfect peach, pineapple, pomegranate, raspberry. I mean, typically this isn't something that you would see advertised to an adult. So I want you to really think carefully about, hey, who are these tobacco companies really advertising to with flavors like this? They're advertising to our kids. All right. So right into who they're advertising to. Now, with the current laws that are in place in the nation, this was a window advertisement. They can't do this anymore, but this was something that was in a front store of a window of a store in which they had all their vaping products. And so all of this is something that's more enticing towards a younger generation or younger people. It wasn't necessarily meant to be advertised to any adult, but you can kind of see where we're going with the advertising. Okay, go ahead. And again, some more of the advertising. You've got things that look more similar to either candy products or pop soda products, alcohol products like Jack Daniels and different things like that. That's how they were kind of packaging and advertising the vape juice or the products used to reload all the vapes. And so, you've got, whenever you've got a company that's saying, hey, this is the Milkman or Cotton Candy or Candy King, these are all things that we're sending to our kids to say, hey, this is good. This is good to put in the body. It tastes good. It feels good. So as an adult, I don't know too many other than maybe the alcohol look-alike flavors. I don't know too many adults that are really liking, oh, this is candy that I get to put in my body. So again, back to who are we advertising to and what's really going on here. Okay. So again, more advertising tactics. When I was a kid, it was more about the Marlboro Man and how cool this cowboy was. They still had tobacco commercials on TV whenever I was growing up. And so the Marlboro Man was like a cool dude. And so we're seeing kind of some of the same concepts in the vape advertising. Is you got Joe Cool here. Of course, sex always is something that sells. And so this is the things that we've resulted to and lowered ourselves to advertise vape. Okay, Jen. More vaping products. Go ahead. And unfortunately, and we're seeing a lot of this go away, which I'm very happy with. Tobacco 21, some of the laws that they've made, but I mean, we're using Santa Claus to advertise vape. So these are just some more out of control vaping advertising that we're seeing. Okay. So what is the big deal? I mean, what's wrong with vaping? So let's just briefly talk about nicotine and what's really the truth about nicotine. You're going to see a ton of mixed messages whenever you get, especially on YouTube. YouTube's not going to discriminate. They're going to present both sides, as far as you'll find videos that say nicotine being bad is a myth. I would just encourage you to talk to, whether you're talking to your own doctor or the doctors that you're finding online that talk about nicotine, really kind of do your research on that. But I'll just briefly talk about it to kind of give you some ideas of what we're seeing through the science world. Go ahead. So nicotine is extremely poisonous. So when we're talking about just a drop, like if you're thinking about if you have a leaky faucet, just a drop from the faucet, you're talking about 30 to 60 milligrams. So if you think about that, one drop out of your faucet, if it was pure nicotine, this is a lethal dose for an average adult. Let that sink in for a moment. So nicotine can be lethal to kids in less than 10 milligrams. And so nicotine, it has some abilities that really kind of get things dangerous in the vape world, and that is that it can be absorbed through the skin. So we see whenever we're looking at emergency room, emergencies that are connected with vaping, we're seeing like spilling of the products, a spill of electronic cigarette nicotine solution can be hazardous, especially if you've got kids around, where right away you have a curious child who opens a container and spills it. That is going to absorb right through the skin, and so it becomes super dangerous right away. So what happens with nicotine whenever it gets absorbed into the body or when it's inhaled? So nicotine travels to the brain. It travels extremely fast. So within 7 to 10 seconds, it's traveling through neurotransmitters, receptors, and that nicotine, where we would see other normal and healthy chemicals link or dock, they start this docking with our transmitters or neuroreceptors in the brain, and we're starting to see a whole different type of chain of reaction or a chain of chemical reactions that influence a number of different bodily functions. So it has a huge impact on what's happening with the body right away within 7 to 10 seconds. Go ahead. So in some of these things, especially when we're talking about the adolescent brain, use of nicotine in developing brains will harm learning. It affects mood. It affects attention, impulse control. And so, especially our teachers that are on here tonight, a lot of my teachers, especially at the high school, this was really a big impact, we were starting to see a lot of mood, attention, especially if someone was just kind of like smoking. If you know someone who's been smoking a great deal of their life, you can tell when there's been a period of time that they haven't had their cigarette. If they're inside and they can't smoke, it is just like that with vaping. Agitation, mood, anger, especially if you try to withdraw from it, it's very similar because it's the nicotine that they're trying to come off of. So nicotine uses or affects how the synapses in the brain or the connections in the brain, how all those cells are formed. And so if we're seeing a regular use of nicotine, we're going to see an increase for future addiction to cigarettes and other drugs as well. And that's really whenever you start to check out what some of these doctors are saying, is they're saying that especially our youth that are going to vaping products, is we're seeing that instead of them coming off of tobacco or cigarettes, that this is linking them back up with smoking cigarettes instead of pulling them off, not to mention the other drugs that it's introducing them to. Okay. So this slide shows a lot of vaping products that are actually marijuana products. And they're supposed to be, by law, look completely different than the typical vaping products or vaping devices. As you're going to see, unless you really know what to look for, you can't tell the difference between these vaping devices and the nicotine vaping devices. Go ahead. So just like the drug world and everything that comes along with it, hey, we're seeing people get more in trouble with being in possession. So what are some ways that we can hide this? And so as more people are trying to hop on the vape bus to make money, we also are going to have vapeware, vaping products that you can conceal what you're vaping. So there in the top left, you've got the gentleman with his hoodie. He's holding up the string that's actually where he can connect the vape inside the sweatshirt and he can vape right through the string. You've got car keys or devices that look like car keys that are actually vaping devices. You've got drinking cups that are vaping devices. There, dead center, you've got, that's an actual working pen that is a vaping device. And then even at our marijuana shop that is there close to the high school, you can go in there and looks like there on the left, that looks like a medical device for like asthma. Our shop there sells that device for you to vape or inhale marijuana. And then of course on the far right, I haven't seen this DeWalt tool looking device, but that's out on the market. I haven't personally seen it, but the rest of these devices I have. Okay. So how can we tell the difference? And so whenever we're out of this screen to share, I'll show you a couple of different devices, vaping devices, especially the Juuls and the marijuana packs. They look identical. And so whenever at school, we're kind of in a better situation in that it doesn't matter what it looks like. Our students and our staff are not allowed to have vaping products, whether it's nicotine, marijuana, or anything on our school campuses. So that's an easy one for us. But at home as parents, you know, whenever you're coming across these, how do you know the difference whether, hey, is my kid vaping nicotine, or is my kid vaping marijuana or something else? And so I was just in our marijuana store last week. I constantly stop by to do little intel checks, try to get information on the latest products. They've got the vape juice for marijuana that looks so much, it's almost identical to nicotine. So even as a law enforcement officer, I can't tell the difference. I actually have to test it or send it to the lab. I do have test kits that we're able to use whenever we're working our own cases, but without testing it, there's no way just to look at the device or look at the juice or the e-juice or the e-liquid and really know what's in there without it getting tested. All right, let's go ahead. So let's just break away a little bit more for what the current statistics. So CDC estimates the vaping rates among middle and high school students have decreased over this last year. So I don't know. I want you to realize how they get these results are self-reported. So according to the National Youth Tobacco Survey, we're down to 19.6%. We were in the mid-20s a couple of years ago whenever our rates were really high. And so I don't know if why that, I'm glad it's decreased. But is that really a decrease that we're seeing at school or just overall? That's not I can't answer that. I don't think we're seeing overall a decrease in vape use, but because of Tobacco 21 and how hard it is to really get access to it now, maybe that's the reason why we're seeing the decrease in that.
I know at Basalt Middle School, we used to take the Healthy Kids survey. We didn't take it this past year because of the pandemic and just making sure that we're maximizing instructional time. So our data wouldn't be included in some of the more recent surveys. And we've noticed an increase at our school in at least 3 grade levels. It's being reported more. Maybe it's not happening more. I don't know, but it is being reported more.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with Jen. I was worried, and I really couldn't speak professionally to who has or who hasn't taken the tobacco survey, but my fear was because of everything that was going on last year that we probably did not see a great national participation in this survey. And so to me, that would speak more to why we're seeing a trending down in the percentage. Just from my experience, just in the Basalt area, I've not seen a decrease. And so, according to the CDC, Colorado has dropped from leading the U.S. in youth vaping 18 to 24. That hasn't changed for underage vaping, but overall, from 18 to 24, we're still in the top 10. I'm sorry to report that for 18 to 24, but Colorado's no longer the overall leader in the vaping rates in the nation. So last year, again, think about how we got these results in vaping rates, but Colorado was at 13% in youth vaping rates. But you can see that our survey for the state was close to 20%. So there's a little bit of, again, back to who participated last year. So I keep talking about Tobacco 21. In December of 2019, the president signed into law Tobacco 21. So this included all tobacco products, not just vaping or all, let me correct myself. It included all nicotine products, not just cigarettes. It included the vaping devices, everything. So this also included language in that law to make certain flavored cartridges illegal. Now, so this is my fear with how the wording of that came about was cartridges, and so really I'm struggling with that language because we're still seeing some of the e-liquids that you're still are not supposed to be available, the flavored liquids that are still out there, and so I'm still trying to figure out that wording and how we can tackle that. But I can tell you in our area, that really resolved a lot of issues. Even some of the stores that were selling vape, it became too big of a headache for them that they stopped carrying vape altogether. But at a minimum, the regular flavors and menthol flavors were still legal as far as refillable cartridges. All right, let's move on. So, and again, the CDC says, oh, let's back up where did we get that one right? Yeah, we'll stay here. So CDC says people who smoke or vape are at a higher risk from COVID-19 and its complications. And so are others that are exposed to secondhand smoke. And so with kind of the apocalypse that's upon us right now with COVID, that adds a whole nother spin to this. And I'm not here to ask where your stand is on COVID or anything like that. I don't want to turn that into anything here, but anything, any kind of sickness, whether it's flu, whether it's COVID, whether it's anything that's affecting the lungs or weakens the lungs or attacks the lungs, that's going to make the body weaker and more susceptible to the effects of smoke and vape. So as of February 2020, over 2,800 people have been hospitalized for e-cigarette or vaping product injuries or emergencies. There were many deaths that were in those as well. And so you can kind of look that up through CDC, and I'll tell you more about what those emergencies were. But then, you know, the big thing was the tobacco 21. Okay, we can move on. So what does the law say? So we have a couple of different state statutes. Basalt Police Department, we're currently looking at a lot of our different ordinances that we'd really like for City Council to help us out with. One of those recommendations from me is going to be vaping, because currently this is where we're at with vaping. So you have to be 21 years old to purchase the products containing nicotine. So in order for you to go into any kind of store or anything like that, you have to look 30 or older, or you're going to get an ID check. So, and it's kind of the same thing with marijuana. You have to be 21 years or old to purchase the products. Where we really, excuse me, let me grab a drink real quick. And really, that tobacco 21 also changed. You had to be 21 also to possess that product, okay? So possession or purchase, you had to be 21 or older, just like alcohol, just like the marijuana in Colorado. So penalties for tobacco range from written warnings to fines. Businesses and distributors, anyone who distributes the nicotine illegally, that's really where that law came down and had a bigger impact on what we saw. I'd like to see more changes in how we can be not so much punitive punishment towards people who are in possession, but what are some, whether it's counseling or what services can we provide, especially to someone who's underage who's in possession. I really would like to see us do a little bit more work on that. And then of course, penalties for marijuana vary depending on what the age or the amount of marijuana that they're in possession of. But any juvenile that's in possession of marijuana, they have to see a judge or participate in diversion programs. Those are things that are not in our control at all. That's something that a judge or we make recommendation for diversion programs on minors in possession of marijuana. Okay. So the big question is where's everyone getting it? Varied sources. We have people who are legally purchasing it and then providing it to our kids. Again, here's the problem with social media. If you're not monitoring your youth social media accounts, you need to see who they're talking to, what they're talking about. You need to be up in their business, because especially here over the last few months, social media has been the connection point to their sources to get vape. Also the internet. I don't know when the last time that you bought any kind of adult product on the internet, whether it was spray paint, anything like that. There's an age verification that's required. Well, if you've gone through that age verification, typically they try to use a credit card as a way to verify age, or a screen will pop up and say, hey, are you 21, or whatever age that you're required to be for that product. All you have to do is click yes. And then these companies are using credit cards as a way to verify that age. There is no minimum age for you to slide into City Market and buy one of those prepaid Visas, or get one of the Visa cards there at the counter and put whatever money you want to on that. So your 12-year-old could buy a Visa card at City Market, get on the internet, click yes on age verification, and use that Visa card to make their purchase. I know that's scary, but that's really just the truth of it. The internet is so hard to monitor. A lot of these things are coming from out of the country, and so it is a disaster. All right, let's move on. So you're all thinking, well, you've given me all this doom and gloom. What can I do? Really, what I'm asking you is to educate yourself, know what's going on, know what the current teen culture is. I am not a marijuana advocate. I don't mean to make anyone mad. I'm not an advocate of marijuana. However, I do go into the marijuana stores so I can get updated on what products they're selling, what's new, what's out there. So whenever I see any of our youth or anybody like that in possession of these products, I know what I'm looking at. And so I know some of you, that might put you in an uncomfortable position, but educate yourself with what the products are that are out there. Whenever you're seeing things, some people think they're looking at a thumb drive, and it's actually a vaping device. You know, some of the things, typically some of the kits come that look like this. And this will come with a vape and cartridges preloaded. Here's kind of what I was talking about whenever we're talking about. So this is a Juul, and then you have just this little piece here that plugs right into your computer just to charge it. So, I mean, just at a quick glance, that looks like a thumb drive. And so if I bring up this product, it looks like a Juul. This is actually a marijuana vaping device. And so, I mean, it looks almost identical, especially if you don't know what you're looking for. You would think that this is a Juul. I know in that one slide, we kind of had those puffer bars, but this is kind of give you kind of a little bit of more context with me holding it. I mean, it's a pretty simple device, small. I mean, it's nothing just to hide it in a shirt. And that's really what we were kind of seeing sometimes in the class. Kids were on social media trying to do maybe a quick hit before a teacher would catch them, different things like that. So that's some of the things that we've seen. But this can go virtually undetected. And that's really, Jen can kind of attest to really the problems that we've seen, especially here lately at the middle school, that it's almost impossible to know without someone talking or telling us what's going on in interviews. We spent a couple of different weeks just doing interview after interview, really trying to stop this from having such an impact that it's had at the middle school here lately. And so we've really worked hard on trying to eliminate this product. But then you get more in advanced products. You've got things that look like this, things that look like music devices. This is actually a vape. You vape out of the corner of it. You've got things that are a little bit more advanced. This is marijuana vaping. It's more of a higher tech module. But then whenever we're looking at refills, this is the refill. So I mean, this is something I could pop in my shirt right away. So all of these things, just really get out there and educate yourself. And so I told you at the beginning, really why I've spent so much time in the last 5 years of my career really kind of diving into vaping. And that's because my youngest son, he is an adult at this point, but he used to vape, and he vaped for a number of years. He vaped A lot of his friends and people told him that it was safe. Everything that he read, he said it was safe. You know, it was just water vapor. And so never really acknowledging that it was something that was harmful. Well, he developed some breathing problems and really started having a hard time with breathing and kind of getting sick. And we spent a considerable amount of time going back and forth to the doctor, even with the doctor asking questions of like, hey, do you smoke? Do you do this? No, I don't smoke. I don't smoke. He never considered vaping as smoking. And then we finally had a scan of his lungs in Denver, and we discovered that they were full of these polyps that were from vaping for so long. And so it's really had an impact. His breathing has become a little bit better, but the damage that's to his lungs, the doc says that's not going to go away. And so that's something that at some point, whatever triggers any kind of cancer or anything, that could be something that could happen at any point. And so now he's 25. And so I have a young kid who has his whole life in front of him who has damaged lungs because of vaping, all because he thought it was safe. It looked cool. It was something to kind of occupy his time as a diversion. Kids vape for a lot of different reasons. It's that nicotine and that drug that's in there that they're getting addicted to that really makes it hard to come off of this product. And so what questions do you have, or what can I help you with, or what can Jen help you with here? What can I do for you tonight?
I also want to have our prevention counselor introduce herself too, because she's available to follow up with individual families as well. And we're happy to shut off the recording after the general questions if you want to ask more questions without being recorded. Go ahead, Giselle.
Yeah, hi. Nice to meet you all. I'm Giselle Bustamante. I'm the new prevention counselor at Basalt Middle School. And I'm here as a resource, meeting with students. We've done a lot of work, like Jen was saying, with three of our grades who have been involved in some vaping and doing some restorative circles and kind of talking to them about the dangers and harms. A lot of those grades are going to be doing a presentation kind of similar about harms and things like that to the grade level below them. We feel like it'll be a good leadership opportunity for them, and it'll also help the younger grades learn and hopefully cause some prevention and, knowledge is power. And then I'll be doing like the older grades, the 8th graders as well. So that's kind of where we're at with the vaping in Basalt right now. And then if you have any questions, you can call the school and they can connect you to me too, or if you have questions now.
And one more introduction. Diana Andrews is the Health Promotion Program Administrator, Tobacco and Marijuana Prevention Office in Pitkin County. If you want to say hi, because they also have resources and other presentations that they're offering.
Hi, yep, I'm a resource. We actually cover Garfield, Pitkin, and Eagle County. And I'll just add that Snowmass Village, Snowmass Village, Aspen, Carbondale, and Glenwood have flavor bans. So hopefully you should not be able to buy any flavored vape products in those municipalities. But yes, I'm a resource that has access to free educational platforms, work with schools on their tobacco-free school policies. And I'm actually going to be hosting a workshop for Basalt High School students February 12th at 2:30 that they can join, and we're going to play a Jeopardy game and learn more about the facts around vaping and non-judgmental, fun way to learn the truth, because marketing in the beginning was not very helpful.
Pretty effective at what it was trying to do. Thank you. Questions?
And if we want to go off the record with the recording, we can do that. So that way, if people feel more comfortable not having their question recorded, that's okay as well.